joining us from. We are here to reveal the solution for another Wizer CTF challenge. Just a reminder, guys, these challenges are part of Wizer's secure code training. This is the public version where people get to try and hack code and find the vulnerabilities and learn about them and how to write better code eventually. So, with that said, I'll let Itzik talk about this CTF challenge and show you the solution.
Thank you, Gabby. So in this hacking challenge, CTF, we're required to hack into the app and get Grandpa Joe's user record, which is something we're not supposed to get. So let's take a look at the code. The code is actually representing an authentication gateway or API authentication gateway. And here's how it works. It has a list of API names that require, or NPI endpoints names that require authentication. And what it does, it checks whether the API endpoint that you requested is requiring authentication. If it does some authentication, a simple one in this case, and then it invokes the API. If it doesn't, it then goes to the else part and invokes the API directly without any authentication. And that's fairly simple.
Cool. So we need to find a way to, if I understand correctly, we need to find a way to access one of the APIs that do require authentication, but without authentication.
Exactly, because get user requires authentication. It's in here. You can see in the list. Requires authentication. We want to bypass that somehow.
Okay? Perfect. So yeah, show us.
How do we solve it? So here's a solution, but let's explain why is that a solution. Okay. The API endpoint is get user. Typically, we would send it this way. That's the expected behavior. And in this way, it is requiring authentication, and then it will go in here and require the token. We'll tell you, hey, there's no token. However, since there is what we call a parser confusion vulnerability here, which two parsers try to do something with the URL, then get user with a slash actually bypasses the require, but is able to still invoke the API correctly in here. So if I hit hack here, it will bypass that, go to the non-authenticated part, and will get me the flag. So that's the solution.
So basically, if this, and guys, this is based on a real life scenario. This is not something we just made up. So this happened. In the case that we saw, a company has moved from one framework to another. Correct, Itzik?
Exactly.
And we created. So they moved from example, from Node.js to Go or something like that. And in order to create an authentication layer that will invoke because they haven't finished converting everything. So they had sort of like a router or authentication layer that said, oh, if it's with Go, go here. If it's with Node.js, go here. So they just added an authentication layer on top of everything. That sort of was the scenario, right? Something that is probably common. Many organizations are moving from one technology to another technology. Each technology on its own is written perfectly, right? The people that wrote it great, but then you involve this third layer, and that's sort of where things start to fall apart.
Exactly. That's exactly URL parsing confusion is exactly about that. You have two parsers that can read the URL, but some of them are sensitive to certain characters and certain representation, and the others are not, or vice versa.
Okay. So talk about the key takeaways and what we learned from this.
Yes. So again, URL parsing confusion.
No, before that, can you go back? Let's see. So this was 3 peppers, right?
Yep.
And how many attempts we had there?
1,050.
So guys, even though it's a single slash, right? We think, hey, look, it's just one character that you add and you bypass it. there were 1,500 attempts, and we had 53 people that were able to eventually solve this. So even though, and this sort of shows you that it's not the payload that makes it complicated, it's understanding how things work.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's tricky because it does look airtight in terms of how it functions. So let's move on to the takeaways. Parser confusion, URL parser confusion takeaways in general. So first of all, we want to try to avoid separating authentication and authorization from critical functionality. If something requires functionality, if something requires authentication, put it together. Sometimes you can't, like in the a case that Gabby mentioned, when you're migrating two systems, you can't. So you separate them. So what do you do if you separate them? It goes to the other takeaways. You always need to avoid doing deny lists and always prefer allow lists. So for example, if in this case we would say only these two APIs or three APIs don't require authentication and all the others do, that would be much better because it will not fail on the critical part. So that's another important takeaway. And I think the last one is pretty common, is also wide. URL is a very complicated object. So you never want to handle it yourself. Never try to parse it. Never try to understand URLs or even part of the URL, the API endpoint for this matter in this case. Always use a URL object and never try to handle it by yourself. Always remember there's always characters and there's always bypasses on URL objects. They're tricky.
Great. So if people want to try this challenge, it's still live. You cannot get into the leaderboard though, but you can still try to see how it works and hack it. You will get a success message if you succeed. In order to do so, you go to wizer-ctf.com. Again, I think this is CTF number 20.
Yep.
It's a retired challenge. So that's why you can't get into the leaderboard, but it's still live. You can still try to solve it. And if you want to try to get into the leaderboard and you want to hack any of the active challenges that we haven't yet revealed the solution to, then you go to the latest challenge. Can you show that again? Go just show them where they need to press.
Yeah, there's a button here. Go to latest challenge. You can click that and it takes you to the latest challenge. You can go to the previous one and etc. And those are all active challenges. The last two the last three are a little more complicated. Maybe the last one is less, but there are a few very interesting challenges here in the active ones today.
So every 2 weeks, we release a new one, we retire an old one, and every 3 months, we do like a bigger tournament. So you can practice. And once every 3 months, we do like this big event and we have prizes. So yeah, if you want to give it a go, if you want to invite your team, you can do that. If you want to use it within your company, we also have something similar for companies, which is private, and that's part of the Wizer platform. And then it comes with also the training courses and all of that. But for the public ones, this is really a fun way to learn how to get into that hacking mindset.
Exactly. And you could pay as a guest. You can play. You can sign up and play. The reason to sign up is you can collect your wins. You can look at what you were able to solve, and you get more benefits by being a user. It remembers your state and so forth. But you can still play as a guest, just like I did right now. You hit hack, and when you hack the challenge, you can insert your name.
Cool, that's it. So we'll be here next week, or when are we revealing the next one?
I think it's next week. Yes.
Next week.
And by the way, there's also a nice community on Discord, on our Discord server, Wizer CTF, that is also available here from the widget. I really recommend joining the community. There's a nice mixture and blend of developers, software developers, and hackers. And the conversation is pretty interesting. And we're talking mostly about the challenges themselves and chatting about that. But it's a really interesting community that can be beneficial for many people.
Great. Okay, guys, thank you very much. Itzik, thank you very much for demonstrating how to solve this. And we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.